Okay, I'll start.
So welcome everyone, and welcome to the SDG Global Festival of Action. Some of you are joining us inside the Zoom webinar, and some of our participants are joining them from the festival's virtual event platform. So welcome to all. And before we kick off our session, a bit of housekeeping has been provided by the UN SDG Action campaign team. So I'm just going to read them out to you, and do listen to them. The first thing is, please all note that this session is part of the SDG Global Festival of Action. So if you're joining here directly in Zoom, we strongly encourage you to log into the event platform afterwards, and we'll share the link in the chat if you don't have it already. And you can then benefit from joining any one of 6 stages, meeting and connecting with others in the connection zone. You can also check out up to 20 exhibits and find additional information in the resource library. Secondly, by joining this webinar, everyone on the panel consents to the image and audio being broadcast. For those of you joining via Zoom, we have the opportunity here to promote participants to be featured in the screen with their cameras and mic on. If we do that, you also automatically give your consent. We have strict, number 3, we have strict broadcasting regulations here. So if anybody is promoted to have their mics and cameras on, no logos, flags, or music are permitted in the background. Number 4, if the broadcasting regulations are broken, we'll need to remove participants. In addition, the host can provide their housekeeping rules for how the session will run, but we'll get into the session straight away. So welcome to our session, everyone, and I'll hand over to our first speaker, Braden.
We cannot hear anything. Sorry.
To the UN. Hello everyone, hope you're all okay and enjoying your day so far. My name is Braden Ben, and I'm super proud to say that I'm a Young Peace Envoy for Football for Peace. First of all, a big thank you to the UN SDG Action for hosting us today. I'm so excited to be joining all of you, and also everyone joining us from all around the world, from different towns, villages, cities, countries, and continents, and especially to the 20,000 people joining us by the virtual link. So, welcome to this How to Football for Peace session in partnership with Elemental Ecosystems and the Flow Partnership. Today, we aim to show you how we are turning it around for climate action, and how you can also turn it around by empowering young people like me all over the world to restore our local water cycles. Today, I'm joined by an amazing dream team. But first, let me introduce my main man, Kash Siddiqui, who is the co-founder of Football for Peace, former international footballer and football diplomat, who is going to be talking about the positive power of football and Football for Peace's purpose, and the link to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I also have with me Miss Lebo, who is a government advisor, and we are so lucky to have her as our co-chair of Football for Peace African Steering Committee. She will be talking about the importance of football and diplomacy for young people. Minnie Jane is also joining us from the Flow Partnership, and she is going to talk about creative ways to engage communities to contribute to local climate changes in water restoration. Football is all about collective community effort, and so is climate action. And so she is going to give us an insight on how we can make this effective approach. Thirdly, we have Zach Weiss from the USA, and he's going to be joining us. And what he's going to do, he's been involved with some amazing things from around the world with his company, Elemental Ecosystems. And he will give us a technical insight into some simple and sustainable solutions of water restoration and the creation of water bodies through young people. So, a little bit more about me. I strongly believe in that the power of football and the good that it can bring. I mean, who doesn't love the beautiful game? Me and my dad always say that football makes the world go round, and that it really does bring people together from all around the world. Now, I honestly believe that we can use football as the key ingredient in uniting the world and utilise our love for the game in a positive way that nothing else could achieve. I am proud to say that I actually launched the Young Peace Leaders campaign at the United Nations General Assembly in New York when I was appointed as the Young Peace Envoy for Football for Peace. And we launched our Young Peace Leaders movement globally, supported by UN member states. Our aim is to create 1 million young peace leaders by 2030 who will take on the actions of good deeds and take on the challenge to turn it around for people and for our planet. The programme focuses on the personal and social development of young people, and they learn on how to build their own resilient communities. Our focus areas are social justice, equality, environment, well-being, poverty, and water, which brings us together all here today. Like a football match, we will have 2 halves to the session. In the first half, Cash and Miss Lebo will talk about football and young people. And in the second half, where Minnie and Zach will connect this to water and to young people. I'd now like to pass the ball on to my good friend Cash, my bro, my partner in all of this, who will talk about how young people are encouraged to become young peace leaders within their own communities. My generation and future generations all must be aware of the issues sustainability from an early age. And our Football for Peace initiatives will bring us together to highlight them and help solve them on both a local and global basis. So, thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope that you enjoy our session. Sending you all big love and hugs from Manchester, and I hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Braden. You are definitely my partner in peace. And thank you for everyone joining. As Braden mentioned, my name is Cash, and I'm a footballer, co-founder of Football for Peace, and now on a journey to actually become a football diplomat. As Braden touched on, this session is geared around how to empower young people to become community activists to restore their own local water cycles. So what is different about this approach? And how do we collectively use this session and use this empowerment to turn it around for people and for planet? By investing in the future of our communities, many pressing global challenges of environment, peace and prosperity can be met, and in the present and most importantly, for our future generations. So where does football actually fit in all of this? And I know some of you joining are football fans, some of you may not be football fans, but I am a football fan. So football, I believe, and we believe, actually can make a huge contribution to these issues. It touches 3.5 billion people around the world. Football gives everyone, no matter from what background, gender, feeling of difference that they can make on the pitch. So when we work with landscape, transformation, actions which individuals and communities can take can actually make a difference to climate crisis. Football is already a community game, and water restoration has to be a community effort. They are such a natural fit, moving the spirit along to achieve a commonly held global goal. So the world is facing a crisis in which obviously all of us here today know, and we really need new methods and to empower new actions to help communities. The best way forward is for young people to take ownership of this. By empowering and motivating the younger generation, they can sustain local ways of life and to provide alternatives for migration to different regions in search of food or water, for example. This proposed collaboration is innovative and going beyond the aid or by just using the football power to empower youth to help create sustainable local livelihoods for communities and people worldwide. By using the unique and powerful combination of water and football, we can engage youth. We can engage youth to help support some of these issues and positively address water issues within their own communities and turning it around for why we are here today with the UN SDG Climate Action. In turn, empowering young peace leaders to become community activists to restore their own local water cycles. So how do we create and mobilize young peace leaders? We think, and we have actually proved through global programs to show that soft power activities like football can actually be the key and succeed in situations where other methods have failed. Football is a tool that attracts and mobilizes youth. It mobilizes adults, it mobilizes heads of states, toddlers. And through this engagement, we have the opportunity for youth on the role that they can play in transforming their own communities. Youth can be empowered to deliver positive actions in enabling water-rich communities to bring peace of mind, peace for the earth, and peace between people. For people that are joining us today that would like to understand how to mobilize young people to take on these actions and to create young peace leaders within their own communities, I will take you through a phased approach today. But for the benefit of time and for today on our goal, I will focus on member states, local government authorities, and community leaders, and even teachers who may benefit from this. So, number one, mobilizing local stakeholders. Working with schools, faith establishments, football clubs, we access people and you can access people. It's the easiest way to do so. Number two, understanding your local issues through local government authorities. What are the issues that your community is facing? Are they societal? Are they environmental issues? And think about what makes this all attractive to a young person. Because in the day of media and everything that's happening, including the pandemic, what is it that is attractive to young people? How do we mobilize and get in their shoes and think from their perspective? Working with communities who might be interested in joining the program. Children interested in football currently and maybe attending a community or a school football club. Children actually passionate about climate or the environment, or just generally their community. But this doesn't mean to say that a child who's not interested in football or the environment cannot take part in the program, because we then use incentives, or you can use incentives to bring youth into this project. Three, practical steps. Through bite-sized information provided by our partners, we can work on contributing to these issues. Simple motivation on taking on action of good deeds that people can contribute. For example, using actions that collectively help restore their own local water cycles. Later, Minnie and Zach from our team will be talking about this as our partners, and they can give more details on it. Number four, football appeal. As I mentioned, football touches 3.5 billion. That's half the planet. That's half the planet, sorry. Having endorsement from clubs, local role models, children, join to get access by maybe experienced players and coaching tips, etc. The power of role models cannot be emphasized enough. And it really shows how much retention a child keeps to a program. Number five, children then go out into their own into their own communities and put on peace tournaments through a toolkit provided. Number six, certification appeal. To improve self-development and belonging and confidence, we work with certified local football federations which enable them to be recognized as individuals that take on extracurricular activity and serve the community. And overall, get to number eight, we then help open exit strategies for the youth to be recognized for future education or employability. So what is it exactly that makes this project different from others working in this space? And I'm sure many of you that have joined are probably thinking this. Well, by engaging through the biggest sport in the world, football, and looking at the biggest necessity in the world, water, makes this a USP. And where does this happen? Through your local communities, through your local community clubs, through your schools. And how do we know that this is a success, and how is it working? Success metrics. It's dependent on the number of young peace leaders created locally as maybe potentially part of international campaigns, and also actions completed within the community for actions of good deeds. Working with local authorities to see the metric changes also. Young peace leaders essentially become community champions, and can become community champions in your regions, in your areas, whatever part of the world you're in today. A role model within their own community to save the planet and turn it around for people, but most importantly, their own local community. Our young people can learn a variety of actions, including reviving water in dry lands, arid lands. They can be designed to support and bump up agricultural production, for example. The program is really focused on facilitating integration, education, and physical health and mental well-being, which is so important with the hard times that we're facing today, through to all the way building sustainable practices for communities by our very own young peace leaders. The aim is to firstly engage a range of young people across villages, cities, or towns from the program in the community, which include football training sessions, life skills, which, as I mentioned, provide non-formal life education. Through these sessions, people grow in confidence and participate and grow in self-esteem and leadership, as well as all kind of communications activities. And I myself have been through the program, and hopefully he's given me the confidence to speak to you people today. And that's what football has given me growing up. This empowered me, it's empowered young people, and to take on leaderships with their own community. It also promotes cohesion across communities, building their resilience to those who actually undermine democratic values and destroy peace. Through experience and through Football for Peace, we have developed an understanding of how to deliver change in the hardest to reach communities around the world. The Young Peace Leaders Program truly does save lives and safeguard communities and promote cultural diplomacy. Across the USA, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and globally, people are becoming more and more polarized and isolated and segregated. And as mentioned, now more than ever with COVID-19 hitting humanity, the global environment is increasingly volatile, and there's a disconnect between the youth, community, diplomacy, and the planet. The UN statistics show that by 2025, 1.8 billion people will be living in countries or regions with severe water scarcity. And without water, there is nothing for people to drink, there is no agriculture, there is no farming with animals, no ecosystems or vegetation, no income, and no life, essentially. Our mission today, with everyone viewing, is to use the power of football to foster global integration and dialogue, to build more resilient communities, and to help develop more sustainable practices which contribute to the environment of our welfare and planet through our 6 key goals. Thank you so much, and I hope we can continue to work together. And one of the key things of our call to action and my call to action, everyone viewing, is let's work in partnership. One of the key goals for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is to do this together, and we cannot do this without one another. We can bring the football power, you bring the expertise, and we'd love to move forward and work with you. So please do get in touch. At this stage, I would like to pass it on to our polls and for any questions open, but thank you. I think we'll wait for about a minute so people can fill in this multiple choice. So can football play an effective role in contributing to climate action? Well, I hope that I've helped persuade many of you to answer yes. I'm not enforcing anyone's answer. Interesting. For that 5% that said no, I'd love for you to get in touch with me, and I would like another session to prove why football can change the world and contribute. But unfortunately, I'm out of time, but I'd like to pass it on to Lebo in South Africa, our co-chair of the steering committee.
Thank you, Cash. Don't worry, we'll get that 5% by the end of this round. Good day to everybody. I would like to discuss around the importance of diplomacy and how the fact that sports diplomacy as a tool, which is what we engage in as an organization, Football for Peace, can be used as influence towards water restoration and its sustainability. So the first point I'd like to address is around the social and environmental issues. What we believe as Football for Peace is that we can combine community-based activities with the diplomatic impact that it may have. So the way we see it is that the community cannot operate in isolation of the diplomatic community that surrounds it. Being obviously in this regard, where we're talking about the government and the role that it plays in ensuring that issues such as water and environmental issues like that, water scarcity and so forth, are dealt with. So we looked at it from a perspective to say, once we organize events and in a soft power way, we are then able to then bring together these organizations. We're able to bring them together with our young peace leaders, with the youth, and we are able to then create some sort of mediation in terms of creating some sort of cooperation and creating a platform to then raise these issues and to also hold the stakeholders accountable and work with them. So when we look at grassroots sports diplomacy, right, it's not only it's a cost-efficient and impactful approach in ensuring that we can deal with issues that are on the ground, which is why our organization's sport of choice then becomes football, mainly because of the 3.5 billion people around the world that engage in football. So the importance of sports diplomacy for us enables these young peace leaders to be able to actively participate in water restoration. So we do that through increasing and creating lasting dialogues and an understanding around these issues, where we look at it where we can facilitate the knowledge around water scarcity, water conflict with wildlife. And we do that through a platform that I would like to highlight, which is called a peace match. So in that peace match, we're able to then contribute to the society. We're able to then engage at any different level. So we're able to engage with any sort of diplomatic community around the governance and so forth, where we look at it in terms of triple Ps, but not in terms of public-private partnerships, but in what we would term public-community partnerships towards then water restoration. So looking really at this double-edged relationship and how do we then come together from a sporting fraternity, soft power, and engage those around us in that regard. So I'll then take you back a little bit. Cash touched on this, but I want to anchor my thoughts around this a lot, because it's a really practical tool that we as an organization has effectively used around other issues that we have now seen as a perfect tool to then raise awareness and create this urgency amongst the youth in terms of water restoration and its sustainability. So as an organization, we organized peace matches in Chile, for instance, where you would have to bring non-perishable food parcels to be able to attend the match. And in such a way, we then created awareness around poverty, and we had a really, really great response in that there was about 23,000 kgs of food that was raised, about 60,000 attendees, 400,000 donated, and about 32,000 beneficiaries, and 1.2 million people globally engaged through this peace match. So I'd like to use this as an example to say, if we can use peace matches to highlight the plight of poverty, the question to us as an organization then became, why can't we use the same concept and highlight and use this tool towards water restoration? So another practical example of where we use these peace matches very, very effectively is in 2019, when the football program was taken to France, and the program was focused on Saint Denis district of Paris, where young people often had to deal with gang violence and were subjected to isolation and radicalization, and they had limited opportunities in life. So through this peace matches, we brought 25 girls and 25 boys to participate in a series of life skills workshops and take part in a community peace match, which promoted values that were that created peace in their own community. So taking those case studies and taking those learnings, we then looked at an initiative where we combined football and water security. So we can essentially enable people to live and play both for essential balanced life. So the way we are going to do this is that we are going to start in one of the African countries, Mozambique. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at some of the wildlife conflict in terms of the water scarcity. And we're going to do a practical peace match with the national government that marks a peace match with young leaders in July to raise awareness around the lack of water, and also to use that piece match then to educate them around water restoration, around the benefits of having a water-rich landscape, about the effect of having a water-rich landscape in terms of agricultural land, in terms of green land, and also using that platform to galvanize so that we can walk out practically with water restoration projects that we're planning to then, with our partners, then implement from October. And we plan to move to 3 African countries with the same concept, where we can, and that will get into later, we can activate and create water bodies so we can empower them to spread and create awareness, these young peace leaders in their own communities. So here you see a practical tool that has worked, and we take it and we say, how do we take this concept and look at one of the world's scarce resources, water, and actually ensure that it can assist. So further to that, we'll then have we'll have a football tournament for the locals and a legacy project that addresses and teaches locals about water management to help support their local community, their economic growth, and their local environment. So if there's anything that I want to highlight is really that Football for Peace has really enjoyed in its entirety the ability to bring this football diplomacies with ministries, local councils, with NGOs, civil societies, bringing individuals, bringing all of these together. We then look at an issue. And in this regard, we've chosen water to support water. And then we use our practical tools, our practical programs to then disseminate all of these skills to these young people, because at the end of the day, you would love young people that are actively focusing on their issues, actively being given the tool to then drive, to communicate with their local diplomatic community around them, and to be able to have skills where they can reach out to different countries as well, and bring those learnings home to make a better country. So as Football for Peace, we believe that diplomacy works hand in hand with football. So we cannot have communities working in isolation when the decision makers do not know what's going on, and it leads to so much civil unrest. So we are that bridge, and we believe that especially young leaders, they must know how to deal and how to communicate with their own diplomatic community. Thank you. I will now hand over to the second poll, and let's see if we'll get 100% this time. So, do we need to educate? Do we need to do more to educate young people on climate action? So we'll give you guys a minute or so to go through the poll. Do we need to do more to educate young people on climate action? We'll just give you some time, and then the host will share the results. Yes, fantastic. I'll now hand over to my panelists to take over. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Mini Jain, and I'm a director with the Flow Partnership. And just a little bit about our organization is that we are an NGO, and that works with communities reviving desertified and flooded lands across the world. And the interesting thing about this partnership with Football for Peace, it came about actually when we were on a project in India, and I'll show you some pictures of that in a minute. But it was actually momentous, the meeting, because till then we'd been talking about how do we get communities to do the work, and the situation globally in terms of water restoration or arid and desertified lands is increasing. How do we get communities to actually do the work? But it isn't just communities that do the work, it is all of us. Water belongs to all of us. All of us use water. So if we use water, we should also look after it. So the conversation with Football for Peace, which began in Jaipur, was actually, how can football, the power of football, and this is what Cash had spoken about as well, how can the power of football combine with what needs to happen globally around water restoration? And then there was this exciting program they talked about, young peace leaders. And in reality, if you ask me, my generation, our time is up. We've done whatever we've done in terms of messes, in terms of what we are trying to do, but actually we need youth to take the baton on and see what they can do in terms of climate action, doing what needs to be done to sort out the global climate problems that environmental problems that we're having. If you take the word peace, if there is no water, there is no peace. If there is no water, people have to leave their homes, they have to migrate, they have to fight with their neighbors for that little glass of water, whatever. Lack of water leads to problems across the world. And so if we really want to look at the word peace, if we really want peace in the world, if we really want young peace leaders to take charge and to take action, you really closely have to look at water. As a footballer, you'll know that you have to drink the water to keep playing the game. You feel thirsty, you can't carry on. So everybody drinks water. And then, and of course, it's exciting that almost everybody in the world plays football. You know, go to any corner of the world and you'll find, even if there is no real ball in hand, there is a tiny little scrap which could pass for a football, and you'll find youngsters playing football. So the power of this partnership, the power of the global appeal of football to deal with a huge global problem like bringing the water back to our landscapes. So I'll quickly take you through some slides of our project in India and what transformation that happened over there. Actually focus on the word transformation. Cash was talking, saying the word transformation, and in this presentation, I also want to bring that word transformation and partnerships and how we can achieve this together. So this, excuse me, 1 second. Yes. This was the area that we were in Rajasthan. This was how dry and arid it was. And this was the water course, which was completely dry. And you can imagine the kind of life people have if there's no water. There's no water to grow food. There's no water for animals. There's no water for drinking. People migrated, etc. So how do you go from that aridity to this? This is a similar area a few years later, not even a few years later, a few months later, when we'd actually done some work in the landscape with the communities and brought the water back. The answer is very simple. If you want transformation in the water sphere, you build ponds. But if you look at the word transformation, how does transformation occur? Transformation doesn't occur in the mind. How do you become a good footballer? You don't become a footballer thinking, this is how I'll play. You have to turn up for practice. Similarly with building ponds, similarly with restoring the landscape, you have to turn up, you have to practice. So if you want to become a young peace leader, you have to turn up for practice and practice doing what needs to be doing for the environment. If you don't practice, then of course you're busy with other things in your life, but then don't be surprised that our environment and our global climate is actually deteriorating further and further. This is a picture of the community coming together. So that takes me to the next word that I wanted to bring in this presentation is partnerships and collaboration. So football is a community game. You can't play the game by yourself or just with another person. Similarly, water restoration is a community effort. So together we can only do it, we can only restore our climate, we can only restore the water in our landscapes and have peaceful lives if we work together. So keep that in mind. It's very crucial that we don't feel we are carrying the burden of change, of looking after the climate by ourselves. You have to collaborate with your community. You have to collaborate with others. You have to find ways and means and programs in your community that you can join in to be able to bring back the richness in the the landscape that you want, in the world that you want, in the world that you will inherit. And then peace will come into the world. The last thing I want to touch about very, very quickly, and I know we're running out of time, is okay, before that I can show you these pictures. So this was the, we started the work in March last year, and that was the state. And then, if you look at the right hand corner, middle of the screen, we built a bank on that river stream, and then behind that bank, when the monsoon came, the water filled up. It was that simple. But somebody had to build this water bank, and that's where community action and our action comes in. And when we do that, this is what happens. And this is how life changes. And when life changes like this, peace comes. So when there is peace and there's prosperity, you can see the joy on the children's faces. You can see that they're actually kicking a football. This is the kind of life we all imagine for ourselves. And I'm sure you young folk do so too. So I'll leave you with one thing, a piece of homework for everybody. It's for all of us. Often I'm asked the question, how do we do something? Where do I begin? Where do I start? The first thing is to ask yourself, where does the water in your tap come from? Where does the water you drink come from? Where does the water you use to cook come from? For those of us who live in cities, often the answer is very simple. It comes from a tap. But actually, you have to really dig and find out, where does the water in your tap come from? What is the source of that water? Is it a river? Is it a watershed? Where is that river? Where is that water coming from? And sometimes you find surprising answers, that the water is coming from a river that is really well resourced and it's supplying the city that you're in, or the water is coming far away from a rural area where there is very little water in the river, and people in that area are suffering, and there's water in your tap. Or sometimes, like in countries like India, you don't always have water in your tap. So the point to start with is educating yourself. Don't wait for somebody else to educate you. You take action, educate yourself, start with your community, and start with actually understanding what the water issues in your region are. And I'd like to leave you with, turn up for practice, find out the information you need to, take the action, and here's the urge, strike a goal for the climate and water. Thank you very much. Now we have a poll. So what proportion of the world's population lives on the driest half of the planet? It's a multiple choice question. Come on, take a guess. What do you think? Could we have the answers, please? Well, there you go. So the correct answer is 85%, and many of you guessed, 34% of you guessed that correctly. And that's actually an astounding figure. So here we go. Your work is cut out for you. Start digging into where those 85% live, which are those areas which are the driest. And now it gives me great pleasure to hand over to my colleague from the USA, Zach Weiss, who will lead you through some of the things that they are doing in the landscape for restoring them. Over to you, Zach.
Yeah, thank you, Minnie. And so we really have this situation where we have this landscape that's degrading, and every year it's becoming more arid. We have this abused water cycle, but we have all these opportunities for change. And so we really believe that these young peace leaders can lead that opportunity for change. And so what are the things that youth can do within our communities to start creating this change on the ground? As Minnie was saying, the biggest thing is to learn and share about the water cycle. The water cycle is so intricate. There's the major water cycle bringing water from the oceans through the continents, but then there's also the small water cycle that's responsible for up to half of our precipitation, and how much water is infiltrating into that landscape, then transpiring by the trees, and then falling again as rainfall. The more water we put into the ground with ponds, with water bodies, the more we feed and charge that small water cycle. And so our youth leaders can really be points of knowledge within their community as they start to learn and observe their environment. It's really important to become literate about your landscape, to understand where the water is coming from, but also what your landscape used to be like in the past. There's so many places around the world, the Fertile Crescent, the Sahara in Africa, parts of Australia, that used to be these lush green places. Now they've aridified and they've become these harsh, extreme climates where there's really no water and no life, but we can reverse that once again. And so you have to see the landscape not just as it is right now, but as it was in the past and as it could be in the future. Because what we want to do is look at our footprint on a whole scale. Whenever people are talking about environmental footprint, they're talking about having a less bad environmental footprint. But if we're only working in having a less bad footprint, we're never going to have a positive footprint, because there's always going to be some people that still have a negative one. And so how do we have a positive footprint? It is by working with water and reestablishing these water systems, reestablishing these vegetation systems that run the biotic pump, cycling water through the earth. And one thing that the youth are really well positioned to be is a voice for the voiceless. That river has no voice. That fish has no voice, the earthworm. And we live in a world where humans control so much of our environment. We really need to be that voice for those voiceless creatures. And so this is something that every youth can do. And it's inherently known as a human that everything has value, that all of these creatures have value, the birds, the animals, the trees. And so we really need to all hold ourselves more accountable in being voices for those voiceless. And so even if it's just one tree, saving that one tree or planting one tree, that's such a simple action that anyone can take, but that has a cascade of effects through time. That tree shades the ground. It helps infiltrate water in the rains through its roots and through its canopy. It's transpiring water and it's cooling the air, a tremendous amount for every gram of water it transpires. But then it's also actually even seeding rainfall, because in order for water vapor to form clouds and then rain, it needs nuclei to form around. And one of the main ones are these bacteria produced in trees. So whether it's a small garden that's making areas for habitat, for insects, for bees, for wildlife, it's giving a patch in an otherwise concrete jungle, or maybe it's even a rain garden where you're actually trying to offset the impacts. Every home has hard surfaces. Every road is a hard surface. How do we start to offset those impacts so that our footprint on the earth doesn't have a negative impact in terms of a water cycle? Whether we're building little beaver dams or vernal pools, areas that hold water seasonally and let that infiltrate into the ground, or even better, building water bodies where we're really finding these veins of the earth and we're allowing that water to enter into the earth. That's when we start to get this whole cascade of impacts, because then you naturally have a bunch of lush green growth, you naturally have a bunch of life, and then that actually re-triggers this water cycle. So you start feeding that small water cycle, which then triggers the big water cycle as well. And what this leads to is more steady rains, less heavy drought, intense droughts, less intense floods, reduction of fire risk, reduction of erosion, and really a general health of the landscape coming back. And so it's easy to build the water body, but it's hard to get the community on the same page to do that work. And that's the most important piece. And our young peace leaders can actually really be essential in finding that common ground, in finding the shared values that communities have and how to navigate that within the community to actually move into action. Because there's plenty of talk in the world. There's talk ad nauseum about climate change, climate action. What we need is action on the ground, action for the earth. And so that's where we really can be these unifying efforts to bring communities together, hear what their concerns are within that community, what their problems are, what their resources are, and then what actions and steps can be taken. And so the really big thing here, it all comes back to reading from the book of nature. Nature has the solutions for every question we could ask. And so it's a matter of taking the time to let your human mind unwind, so that you can really receive that information. And so whether that's just going to a spot every day, some people call it a sit spot, and getting into a meditative state where you let your mind unwind, then you can really start to learn from nature. And if you spend that time to learn from nature and to connect with water and really put yourself in the shoes of that river or that stream or that lake or that fish, and try and understand, how is that organism feeling? What are the impacts that it feels? And what is the impacts that my life and my existence is having on that? And then you can really start to understand the impacts of our current paradigm of water that's all around drainage. It's around shunting the water away from all of our buildings, all of our roads, which of course naturally leads to intense flooding events because we're driving all of that water away. We're putting it in its energized state. But then because we've drained all of the water out of the landscape, we're naturally going to then have the next drought. And in the worst cases, then the landscape burns. You know, having experienced Australia and the US, this fire regime that we're seeing, it really has to do with the intense disturbance of the hydrological cycle of our planet. And this is a feedback loop. So the more we drain the water away, the drier it becomes, the less water we have in the small water cycle. And it's this positive feedback loop of aridity. And this is how we've desertified 1/3 of the earth in 10,000 years. But there's also a positive feedback loop when we start holding that water in the landscape. When we hold the water in the landscape, it cools the air, which brings in more low pressure air, more humidity, which then infiltrates into the ground better, cools the earth, increases its ability to hold the water. And so in the same way that we have this watershed death spiral leading to crises around the world, when we start to take action with water, we start to actually rebalance all of that extremes, all of that severity. And so really our youth is our future. And if our youth is understanding about the water cycle, understanding how they can be good stewards for the water and good stewards for the other life on our planet, then we're going to be moving in a really positive direction. And so we really believe these youth peace leaders can drive this change within their community by teaching their peers, by teaching their parents, by teaching their community, finding common ground, and then moving forward into action. And so I think, do we have one more poll or do we move into the question and answer?
Q&A.
I think we're into the question and answer now. So we'd love to hear from you guys in the audience. You know, what are your questions after hearing this? What are your interests? You know, what does this leave you feeling with? Do you feel like we can really create this change through our youth leaders?
I know there was a question for Minnie from Bhumika.
Yes, there's a question here. From the picture, men can be seen in the center. How about women's role? Supposing women and children are usually carrying water from the rivers. Just to quickly answer that one in terms of the project that we've done. In Rajasthan, traditionally, of course, and also in Africa and other countries, it is the women who can walk miles and carry water on their heads. And it's the girl children who go with the women. But in the projects that we, you know, everybody's role in the community is crucial. And the ones who benefit if the water comes back is actually the first thing that starts happening is that the girl children start going back to school. And then without the say-so of the women, the work in the community, the water work in the community actually doesn't happen. And we've held many community meetings where we have, you know, meetings with the men, depending on the culture, meetings with the men separately and the women separately. But until the women say yes, the work doesn't happen. So women have a very crucial role. Without that, the solution is only half. So I agree with you completely. Women's role is absolutely crucial in balancing what the water in the landscape. There's another question here. What resources would you direct youth leaders to if they want to make changes in their local water cycle? Zach, would you like to?
So we actually have two platforms that we're working on, both Minnie and myself, that are going to be really the clearinghouse for this. Waterways.world and waterstories.app. And this is where we'll really start to have a lot of information about what actions people can take in their communities. So this is something we'll be building and trialing as we start to work in these different projects, particularly in Africa, and we'll start to have handbooks. But that's all in the works right now. I see another question here too. Is there an innovation that our technologies can turn salt water into fresh water? I think we have a great invention that does that. It's called the sun. And the sun is constantly turning salt water into fresh water, and it's constantly bringing it to the continents. It's really a matter of when that fresh water comes to the continents, do we hold on to it? Do we feed that into the earth and into the water cycle, or do we drain it away, causing floods and then drought? And so we have these technologies that are very energy intensive, don't make a lot of sense, don't really work, but we also have these natural technologies available to everyone around the world that are really the ones that I look to for answers.
Brilliant. Hey guys, I think Dylan from our team has promoted Neil, who's coming on to speak to us. Hi Neil, you're on mute. Okay. His question to the team is, what resources would you direct youth leaders to if they want to make changes in their own local water cycle?
I think Zach has just answered that one to some extent.
Yeah.
There are many resources. The first, I mean, I would always say that start with what you know, start with what's happening in your community, and start with what excites you. So there is so much information out there, you can get overwhelmed. So start with the bit that excites you. I want to link this to another question over here. In a busy world where we are busy in our career, how to spare time for these activities? So the question in response to that is that when the water runs out, that's too late. So if you know how to spend water or use water, then you should know how to care for the water so that it is there. And so that is not spending time. That is actually the time that we need to dedicate towards finding out, towards understanding what it is that we can do in our lives to make sure that the water wealth that we have is there for us and for future generations.
Yeah, and to build on that point, water is the capital for all life on this planet. We are more than 99 out of 100 molecules of water. And so if we're really concerned about the health of the planet, it has to start with water. And we all know this with our bank accounts, but we really need to treat the earth and its water bank the same way. If you're always taking out of your bank account and never putting into it, that gets really bad. And when it gets really bad, it's hard to get out of it. And we all know how that looks. And it's the same thing with the water cycle. If we're always extracting, and never infiltrating, that gets really bad and really hard to overcome, the same way that huge debt is hard to overcome. And so it's easier to put a little bit over a long time to make that change versus getting to the point where it's a huge problem and you have this giant hill to climb to get out of it.
It's really that simple. It's how we reorient our thinking. If we think, yeah, the water is there, it'll always be there. That's one way of thinking. If we think of it as our resource, as our wealth, as our capital, then we will look after it, just like we look after the money in our bank, as Zach said. So this is where the first shift in our thinking has to come, whatever our age. And then we know that all life on the planet will be looked after if all of us start looking at water in that way.
Hey, I think Laura's been brought to the question. I think Laura, now you can speak to us. Is she on there?
I think we've got
She had
about
a
2
few
minutes, Cash.
Yeah, Laura is here. Hi, Laura. You're on mute still. No, not sure if they can take themselves off mute. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know how to do it. Laura's question was, how can, no, sorry. Can we start a global campaign for water to distribute equality? Is it possible to create a global campaign to distribute equality in water? And how can we include more young people? Was that right? No.
Yeah, I think it's not only possible, but it's actually necessary. We're in this very scary situation right now where the global elites are taking control of the water through privatization. It's happened entirely in some places, leading to really catastrophic situations, and it's currently happening in others. And so we really urgently need a campaign for the communization of water, because it is a common good. And more so than that, when water is managed to make money, scarcity is a really good solution, because you make lots of money in a scarce water world. When water is managed for abundance, you can't sell water for anything, but the world is abundant. And so we need to decide as a race of people, as humans, do we want to live in a world where water is scarce and expensive, or where it's abundant and free? And I want the latter, and it's going to require us coming together and unifying as people to make that happen, because if it's left to the bankers, they're going to manage it to make money off of it, not for the common good.
And I'd really like to add there that it begins with us. So we start with us, we think
Minnie,
of where we
sorry.
can change. Sorry, Lebo?
We've got about 2 minutes left. I think the panelists will put their emails in the box on the side, and then maybe we do some quick 30-second closing remarks.
Are you? Yes.
Okay, perfect. Lebo, you want to go first with your closing remark?
Okay, I'll just take in the question of the governments, because I talked about diplomacy, but my closing thoughts are really that young people have to become active. They need to understand who their local council members are. They need to understand the budget cycles. They need to understand the programs that are being run by their respective governments. They need to be able to know who the decision makers are and engage them. And also reach out to organizations all over the world that you can then partner with to amplify your voice. But hold them accountable. Don't do it in an aggressive way. Find ways to work with them. Even the political parties, find out what is it that they are campaigning on and put water on their agenda. So take the power back and don't fight, but rather create a partnership.
Thank you. Guys, we're about to close, so it may cut out, but thank you so much. We look forward to working with everyone on the panel and continuing our partnerships. Thank you so much for everyone joining.